NBA trade season has to be one of the funnest portions of the NBA season, so I decided I would make a video about one big question that 5 NBA teams need to answer before the NBA trade deadline. Now, the first team we're going to talk about is the Charlotte Hornets. Should the Hornets test the trade market for LaMelo Ball? Despite LaMelo Ball having the best season of his career, the Hornets remain the third worst team in the East. They recently snapped a 10-game losing streak with a win over the Suns, who've also been trending in the wrong direction. LaMelo, when healthy, is a top 5 point guard, but his biggest weakness is his availability. Last season, he missed 48 games due to an ankle injury, and foot issues like that are problematic for a player who relies on speed and agility. Even after the injury seems healed, he still occasionally misses games due to ankle soreness, suggesting he hasn't fully recovered. This is concerning, especially given the Ball family's injury history, with Lonzo missing 2 full seasons due to knee problems. LaMelo has played just 57% of his games with the Hornets during his career compared to Anthony Edwards, who has played 93% of his games for the Timberwolves. As a result, the Timberwolves have had more success. This raises a critical question for Charlotte. What should they do with LaMelo? From a front office perspective, I'd be hesitant to move on, especially since the team is just beginning to find its direction. However, with LaMelo's value at its peak, the trade deadline could offer the best opportunity for the Hornets to get the most return. That said, any trade likely wouldn't offer a return worth letting him go, and they risk falling into the same rebuilding cycle the Wizards have. In my opinion, the Hornets should stick with LaMelo and bet on his health. From LaMelo's perspective, though, he might want to compete given he's never made the playoffs. While a trade to a contender could benefit him individually, from a team standpoint, it would feel like a step backward for Charlotte. Now, the second question is going to be for the Timberwolves, and the question is, what in the world do you do with Julius Randle? While the Timberwolves have managed to scrape into the 7th seed, it's clear that the season hasn't gone as planned. I think the front office underestimated how much replacing Cat with Julius Randle would hurt the team. They probably thought they could free up some salary while staying competitive, but that hasn't been the case. Now, I don't see a scenario where the Timberwolves want to keep Randle long term, and his trade value is likely to be low at the deadline. However, if they do look to move him, they could send him to a non-contender where Randle would likely decline his player option. One potential option is the Nets, who are reportedly open to blowing up their roster for a haul of picks. This trade could work if the Nets are confident that Randle won't opt into his $31 million contract for next season. The Timberwolves could trade Randle along with the 2025 Pistons first-round pick they have, plus a couple of second-rounders for Cam Johnson and D'Anthony Melton. The thing is, this deal would likely favor the Timberwolves, as it would give them a way out of Randle's contract. While the Nets might be willing to negotiate, this isn't the type of deal they'd rush into, as they could potentially get better offers elsewhere. Now, the third question is going to be about the Pelicans, and the question they need to answer is, do you let Brandon Ingram walk in free agency? It initially seemed like the Pelicans fleeced the Hawks when they traded for DeJounte Murray without giving up Brandon Ingram. However, things aren't looking as promising now, as they're not even a play-in team. Dyson Daniels, who struggled with the Pelicans, has found new life in Atlanta. Additionally, Zion Williamson's future is increasingly uncertain, and what was once seen as a promising rebuild after landing the number 1 pick in 2019 now appears to be heading toward a complete reset. Reports indicate that the Pelicans may be open to starting over. A clear sign that a team is on the verge of making changes is when they have win-now players without win-now results, and that's exactly the issue with the Pelicans. They got DeJounte Murray and a 33-year-old CJ McCollum, and you just can't keep those guys on the roster at this point. The Pelicans' rebuild was supposed to begin after trading Anthony Davis to the Lakers in 2019, and although they were handed a bright future, they squandered it. Now they're faced with the tough decision of moving on from Brandon Ingram. While he's a one-time All-Star, it seems safe to say he's reached his peak, and he's asking for a major contract extension. The Pelicans don't want to give him that extension, and other teams will be aware of his hefty price tag during trade negotiations, which could hurt his value. The Pelicans should have moved him sooner, as his trade value continues to drop. If I were the Pelicans, as painful as it is to say, I think they might need to let Ingram walk in free agency. He's asking for a $50 million contract extension, and with the salary cap limitations under the new CBA, it's tough to imagine many teams being able to afford that. I feel like most people who clicked the video knew at some point that we were going to be talking about Jimmy Butler and the Heat, and if you did think that, you were correct. Now, the question that the Heat need to answer is, what's the best way to move past Jimmy Butler and get back to competing? Honestly, I'm getting a bit tired of the constant talk about the Jimmy Butler situation. It feels like every time you watch a video, he gets brought up, no matter the topic. But at least now we have some clearer details to discuss. It seems like Jimmy really wants to end up in Phoenix, and this whole thing looks like it's going to be a complicated process. The Suns might not even have the assets to pull off a trade for Butler, and considering they're already a deep second apron team, finding a deal that satisfies the Heat, the CBA, and Bradley Beal, so he's willing to lift his no-trade clause, seems unlikely. Recent reports suggest that Jimmy doesn't want to go to the Grizzlies or the Bucks, which is interesting since earlier it seemed like he'd be willing to go anywhere other than Miami because he literally said that, but I had a feeling that when he said that, it was more about trying to send a message to Pat Riley and the Heat organization. Now, it seems like he only has his eyes set on Phoenix and isn't really cooperating with other options. I recently saw a proposed 3-team trade involving the Heat, Magic, and Suns, and here's how it would work. The Phoenix Suns would get Jimmy Butler and a 2029 second-round pick from Orlando in exchange for Bradley Beal and some future picks. The Miami Heat would receive Jonathan Isaac, KCP, and future picks from Phoenix, giving up Butler and Jaime Jaquez Jr. Meanwhile, the Orlando Magic would land Bradley Beal and Jaime Jaquez Jr., giving up Isaac, Caldwell Pope, and a second-round pick. Beal would help lead the Magic as a veteran scorer, and I could see him lifting his no-trade clause to go there since the Magic are still building a competitive team. Personally, I don't have strong feelings about this trade idea, but what really stood out to me was when the Warriors announced that they were moving in a different direction and not pursuing Butler. That made me realize that maybe some of the blockbuster deals we've been talking about might not happen after all, but we'll have to wait and see how things unfold. Now, the last team that we're going to be talking about and the question that they need to answer is, what should the OKC Thunder do with all their picks? Now, I've been excited to talk about the OKC Thunder for a long time, especially because they're a unique team. Not many teams are as good as the OKC Thunder with a future as bright as theirs. They have the core of J-Dub, Shea, and Chet, and that's what makes them a real contender in the West. If Chet returns to even half of what he was, this team will be in an incredible position. While they might not feel the need to make major moves and could choose to continue building organically, they do have the assets to pursue high-profile players and trade rumors. For example, they could go after someone like Jimmy Butler. I'm not suggesting they should, in fact, I'd advise against it, but it's certainly within their reach. Teams from around the league may be calling Pat Riley about potential trades, but once OKC enters the conversation, they're immediately at the front of the line. That's the power of having all of their own future first-round picks, plus 6 additional ones from other teams, along with a couple of swaps with the LA Clippers. They also have the flexibility to target players like Cam Johnson if they wish. It's clear that the Thunder need more shooters, as teams have been focusing heavily on Shea. Adding more spot-up shooters, or even just a solid 3-point shooter with defensive capabilities, would go a long way. At some point, OKC will need to use these assets, as they won't stay cheap forever. Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and Kaysen Wallace won't be on rookie deals for long, and SGA is eligible for a Supermax extension this summer. They won't have the financial flexibility to pay all these players and still sign multiple first-round picks forever, so the time is fast approaching when they'll need to make some moves. It'll be interesting to see how they complement their young core in the near future. But what do you think? What's the biggest question your favorite NBA team needs to answer before the trade deadline? Tell me in the comment section below. Until next time, peace.